We're here in a field in McPherson County, and today we're going to give you an overview of how to do in-field measures for the wheat quality tour in terms of yield estimates. So first thing that we're going to do, as you can see, we are about 120 yards from the border of the field. So whenever we stop at a given field, we want to make sure that we walk in past, because the border of the field is always going to be a little bit more stressed and perhaps a little bit different than the rest of the field. That's where there's trucks are turning around and many other things ongoing, right? So we want to make sure that we walk into the field at least 100 plus feet or yards so that we're out of the turnway. Once we're in the field as we are here, we can identify we have two different formulas, either the headed formula or the non-headed formula. In this case here, we're looking at the crop. All the heads seem to be out already, so we will use the headed formula. Once we walk in the field and you get past the first 100, 150 yards or so, first thing that we will do, our yardstick, we're going to randomly throw it away. Wherever it lands is where we want to go and make our sampling, right? So we'll walk all the way into the yard, make sure you don't lose it. And first thing that we do is we collect the plant height. So put the yard all the way until the bottom of the canopy, and you see here in this case until the top of the head, we are 29 inches and a half. Use your yardstick to write it on, so you can put there field number 1, for example, 29.5 is the height that you got. Second thing, we need to measure row spacing. The way we do row spacing, we get 3 consecutive rows and we measure from the center of the first one to the center of the third one, so that gives us 2 spacings. In this case, we go from 0 to 15 for 2 rows. That means 7.5. So that's the second number that I will write down right here, 7 point. We need to estimate also what crop growth stage this field is. And if we look here, of course, all heads are out. We can briefly take a look inside and see what growth stage the crop is. It seems like all the florets are still very nice and green, so we give this field here heading, right? So this field is just headed out now. Even some of the heads are not fully out yet. There still might be a few of them that are just now coming out of the boot, but so that we're going to give the growth stage here of heading. Look at the staging of the crop. We have heads that are just coming out and heads that are already out there. And so this crop is at the heading stages of growth. You can actually look inside here and see how close we are for any grain developing, but we're still far away. So these will be the heading stages of growth. So when we are staging the field, different tillers are going to be at different growth stages. Here, for example, from the very same field, we have one tiller that is at the boot stage, meaning that the heads is still entirely inside the stem. It's being pushed up, so very soon it's going to be going through heading, where we call here, it's just the beginning of heading. You can see the heading starts to pop up there, those awns, or we call these awns or beards of the wheat head already out, and the head coming out of the boot. And then finally, the majority of the plants in this field are already at heading stage, which means that they are entirely out like this, at least partially to entirely, right? So again, while it's normal that we will find many different stages within the same field, we stage the field based on the predominant stage, which again, looking at this and taking a deeper look at each sampling that we've done, it is at the heading stages of growth. So just a difference here between a crop at the boot stage versus going through the beginning of heading versus completely headed out. So we have our height, we have our growth stage, where we're going to write down here in terms of heading, and we have our row spacing. So now, the next number that we'll need is how many heads are there in a row foot. So for that, this area where we are going to sample, you're going to go down into the canopy, and 12 inches, right? You put the ruler, you put this yardstick in the bottom, and you're going to select and create a bunch of plants like this from 0 to 12. So in 12 inches, how many heads are there, right? So we have these heads out here, and now we're going to count all of them in those 12 feet. It's very important to put the yardstick in the floor and not on the top here, because that can give you different counts. So in 12 inches of row here, we had 31 heads. That's the next number that I will write down here, 31 heads. And then out of this very same sampling spot, we're gonna catch a couple or three random heads, and we're gonna count how many spikelets we have in a head. Now, you're gonna notice that the very bottom spikelets, many times they are not gonna fill a grain, so we don't count those. And also many times, especially in a year like this year when there's some freeze damage out there, we're also not gonna have some grains developing in the top, so you need to be very careful with that. But in this case, it seems like in the bottom three spikelets here, there will be no grain forming. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 that will probably produce some grain. 13. And then finally, we need to get an estimate of our soil moisture to have an idea of how many grains are going to be formed in each one of those spikelets. Is it 1.5, 2, 2.5, or even 3 in average, right? It does seem that the topsoil is very dry here. So probably in this part of the state, probably using 2.2, 2.3, somewhere between 2 and 2.5 would be very realistic here. So we can go with 2.3, for example. But again, it probably would not be much more than 2.5, very likely not less than 2 either, because we already excluded the top and the bottom of those spikes. This is one sampling, right, in a car with 3, 4 people inside the car. We want to do at least 9 or 10 samplings in the field. So each person will do 3 to 4 samplings in the field. Again, then you'll walk around and throw the stick again, select another random spot. Another very important thing to keep in mind when doing your sampling is make sure that you're sampling a field of wheat and not of rye or other crops that might look alike. And here we have the comparison between wheat on this, my left hand right here, versus rye on my right hand right here. And you can see that it's very easy to tell the difference, right? Where wheat, the spikelets are a little bit more spaced in between them, whereas rye, they're stacked together. On rye, it's also going to have a lot more spikelets out there. So if you're counting these, it might have 20 plus, whereas on wheat it's very rare. They're going to get beyond 16 or 18 or so. So if you're doing a field of rye, because of these huge heads, your yield estimates are going to come very likely much higher than what we have on wheat. And so again, just make sure that we're sampling the right crop, which is wheat and not rye or any other lookalike crop. Another difference that we need to keep in mind here as we look on the heads on this way is that the rye head is going to be much flatter, as you can see here, very flat as compared to wheat, which is going to be more of a triangular shape. So again, just make sure that we are sampling the right crop, not a head that is as stacked as this is and as flat as this is as well. Again, because this is going to be a completely different crop with a different yield potential than what we have on wheat, which is what we're looking for. Fairly common this season is freeze damage. And as we can see here in this field, in this part of the field in particular, is a part that was actually quite impacted by freeze damage. In particular, that freeze of March 26th and 27th, when temperatures got to about 11 degrees or so. So quite cold, and some of these heads did get toasted by that freeze damage. So what we're looking at here is portions of the head or even entire heads that are turning white, simply because the freeze killed those spikelets. And then in this case here, it can happen quite randomly. In this case here, we can see that the entire upper third of the head is really not going to develop any grain. It's already turning white from that freeze event. About same thing here. The entire third of the head seems to already be killed, and it's very easy to feel like it's not as turgid, and nothing is going to actually be filling up from here and up from there. So again, very high incidence of freeze damage in this field. We will be sampling these fields normally because it is going to be common this year here in Kansas. So what's important to keep in mind is how do we account for this, right? And again, you throw your stick, you fall down in an area where there has been freeze damage, you count the number of heads normally. Make sure that when you're counting the number of spikelets here, that you're not counting the spikelets that have been affected by the freeze damage.